Hello, friends. I hope you're enjoying some of that initial videography. I invested in a macro lens, which allows me to get really up close. As you know, of course, I'm completely fascinated by nature. And to me, it's amazing that I have been alive almost 50 years and I can walk out into these Wisconsin woods. And every time I go out, I find something new and amazing. And this macro lens lets me get in even closer and see some things that maybe I would have walked by before. But when you take a little bit closer of a look, it's pretty amazing what's there. So, as you know, in the whole concept of rewilding, we're often looking at our cultural influences, and especially those that we have accepted blindly, and how they affect our mentality. Now, Rebecca and I just put out our latest podcast episode. It's on toxic relationships, toxic people. And I wanted to address that a little bit today because well, it's something that can really impact our lives. When we have that toxic person in our life, it can feel so draining. The amount of emotional energy that goes into that can feel like it degrades not just our experience with that person, but it degrades every aspect of our life. Hopefully, what I share today, you will find helpful in your life, not just with toxic people, but with relationships in general. And just like I'm seeing things, new things, every time I come out into the woods, you'll see how this ties in with seeing every moment, every situation that we experience with fresh eyes. All right, let's see some of those natural wonders that I encountered on my way out here. I'm going to start this whole thing out by revealing that I, in my life, and Rebecca, we have been labeled toxic people at one point. And I'm sure at many points, behind our back, but this is the one time that it was right there in front of us. Now, through further communication, a friendship basically is what it was, and it was repaired. But that label was applied. And I'm doing this to level the playing field a little bit and to remind us that this idea of a toxic person, it's really easy to get caught into the idea of other. When our mind can put a label on something, our mind becomes very comfortable. As you know, our minds are not very happy with ambiguity. They love a label. And so I'm going to venture out and say that the reality of any human being on the planet is that we are going to have times when we are our best selves and when, in general, we are kind and generous and compassionate. And we are going to have moments when we are not our best selves, when we lash out, when we see only the negative, when we attack those around us, even maybe people that we love or call friends. Now that, for most of us, unless you're a ninja, Jedi, Zen master, that's probably a part of your life experience, that people will see you in both of those aspects because you harbor, like me, like almost everybody else, those aspects within yourself. And when we realize that, we have taken a huge step forward into where I'd like to go with this idea of toxic people, which is that there is a toxic person in me, and there's a toxic person in you. That label at various times in our life could be applied probably to all of us. Now, granted, we are all going to have a different baseline. So just like we all have a different emotional baseline, my emotional baseline may be pretty high so that I'm in general a very happy person, but once in a while I can have a crash. My baseline may be here where most of the time I have a pretty negative outlook, but once in a while circumstances conspire to really make me feel happy. In the same way, we all have a compassion baseline. And that might be a good way to rephrase this idea of toxicity. It's where's a person's compassion baseline? If someone has a very high compassion baseline, we feel cared about by them. We feel acknowledged by them. We feel listened to by them. If someone has a very low compassion baseline, then in general, we're going to feel that they don't see us, that they don't acknowledge us as fellow human beings, that they don't care about us, and basically treat us like dirt. Incidentally, we should be treating our dirt, our soil, much better. So maybe not the best little example to use. So all of us probably have some people that we know or we interact with who are lower on that compassion baseline. That in general, they don't exercise a lot of compassion towards the people around them. And these are usually the people that we label as toxic. Now, I'm also going to acknowledge that sometimes there are people that are so low on that baseline that they are so engrossed in fear and aggression that that label of toxic, it may be justified. And in those cases, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about here, maybe not so relevant. There is a time when there is, let's say, an abusive marital partnership, when the right thing to do, maybe the only thing to do, is to walk, to get out of there. There might be a time in a work situation where there's a boss that just thinks you are, what can we use besides dirt? Poop, that you are just poop. But poop's good too, isn't it? Because that's really important for bringing nutrients back into the soil. Oh man, having trouble finding something bad here. So they really just think of you as toxic nuclear waste, and they have it out for you. And the right thing to do, maybe the only thing to do, is to just leave that work situation and go somewhere else. Now, those aside, I'm going to challenge us today. Tell us the thing that maybe we don't want to hear, and say that maybe part of that toxic person that we see, that part of the responsibility for that toxic person lies within ourselves. And here's why I say that. Let's imagine that there is a person in my life who is very low on that compassion meter, and I am feeling like I want to call them toxic. Now, when I interact with another human being, we all know that how we act ourselves, the words that we choose, the body language that we use, our entire approach is going to have an effect, sometimes a very profound effect, on how that person responds or reacts in turn. Sometimes not that much of an effect. So that person may be low in their compassion meter and be very set in their ways, and you could be as nice as you wanted to be, and it's not going to change them a lot. Usually, I have found that my approach to somebody how I act towards them, how open I am, how much I connect, what my body language says, those differences can really change how that person manifests, essentially. And this is important to remember because if I have labeled a person as toxic, then when I walk in, am I going to greet them warmly? Am I going to smile at them? Am I going to acknowledge them as a human being? Do you see where this is going? When I've labeled somebody as toxic, my compassion towards them has gone down. I've gone down in my compassion meter towards that person. Then how I treat them is going to fit right in with that toxicity mindset. And the chances of them manifesting any differently in my life, coming out and smiling or saying I'm sorry or something like that, are pretty low because they're getting that crap from me. And it's not just how I treat another person. It's also what I carry inside of me that makes that person more toxic. And I mean that not makes them more toxic, but makes them more toxic in my experience, in my perception. So if I am in the habit of having a negative encounter with somebody, and then I take that negative encounter and I carry it with me, and I had that encounter, let's say at your workplace, and then I'm walking home or driving home or biking home, and I'm thinking, that person is such a, I just can't stand them. And then I get home and I see my lovely wife, and she says, hey, how are you? And I say, oh, just really bothered. It's the same thing as yesterday. This guy is just always in my face, and this, and then my wonderful children come up and say, Dad, would you like to play? And I say, I just can't. I'm just so pissed off at this. And you see, now I've taken that and I've carried that with me. We humans tend to be very good at that. As Beck and I spoke about in the podcast episode, we're finding neurologically that our minds are very good, usually, at focusing on the negative. And if we allow that to be our default, then I'm going to carry that with me. In that person that I encounter only at work, I'm carrying with me all day long. They're now not just being toxic to me, but through me are becoming toxic to my family. But they're not there. That's just me carrying that and then spewing that back out. So in two ways here. A, through holding a mindset that that person is toxic. And then B, through carrying those encounters with me. In those two ways, I tend to exacerbate or increase the amount of toxicity that a person has. This toxicity is independent of their compassion level. Their compassion level just has to do with how they treat me, how I see them. And that, incidentally, how they see me, that is not under my control. But how I see them, how I treat them, and whether I carry their baggage with me, those are choices that I get to make. I think the most important element here is recognizing how often we can blame. We have seen this in our leaders. We have seen this in people in the media, and we probably see this in ourselves. That it's very easy to blame others. And when I blame, then I absolve myself of all of my personal power over the situation. I say, I'm a victim, and that's it, the end of story. Instead, if I do not blame, but I say, how do I play into this situation? Then that's very transformative. Because then when I look out at the world around me, I'm participatory. I'm not just a victim anymore, a helpless victim. I am participatory, and I can make positive changes through my actions, through my words. The challenge I would put before all of us today is there a place where there is a person who you see as toxic? And after your next encounter with that person, whether that's today or tomorrow or next week, after that next encounter with them, can you come away seeing them as a human being, raising up your compassion meter with them so that when you look at them, they are not toxic people, toxic person, simple label that your mind wants to affix, but instead they are a complex human being. They may have a compassion level that is pretty low on the scorecard, but that can change over time. And when I see another person, even if they do not hold the same beliefs as I do, if they don't look like me, if they don't have compassion, if they don't have qualities or mindfulness or things that I think are important to cultivate, that doesn't mean that I can't have compassion for them. And if I do have compassion, I strengthen that compassion within myself and I make myself a little bit better of a person through that encounter. So here's that challenge. After that next encounter with the person, can you come away seeing them not as a toxic person, but as a human being? And how does that change your perception and your experience of them? And can you come away a little bit stronger and more compassionate yourself? Final word, I already stated it, but I'm not applying this to truly abusive relationships. There are definitely times to just get out. But if that's not your situation, see if you can transform even by 1% that experience you have by what you bring to it. If you take this and apply it to a toxic person, then how much easier to apply it to people you love? How much easier to apply it to your experience of your next walk out in nature, when instead of affixing labels, oh yeah, there's that plant I've seen, there's a birch tree, I've seen that 1,000 times, to go and experience that birch tree a little bit. Taste it, smell it. Notice if it's a paper birch, that white powder that comes off on your fingers. Really get to know that plant a little bit more. Whatever moment you're in, see if you can experience it a little more richly if you do it without affixing a label that stops the story, that cuts off curiosity, and that closes doors. Instead, let's embrace that curiosity, embrace compassion, and open doors. There's that drippy bird again. I am feeling so much love today. I just want to say thank you all for being part of this channel. Thank you for everything you do to make my family's life what it is. Those of you who are patrons, those of you who have purchased our books or left reviews, those of you who leave comments, even those of you who are just watching silently and never leave a comment, you're all making a difference in my family's life, in allowing us to live this incredible life of being able to live our dreams, to have this be my office. That's not totally true because I have to go and edit these videos. But for a large part, look at this. How blessed am I that I get to be out here, make these videos, and then share thoughts and life experience with all of you, and that you share back with me and then enrich my life and my family's lives. Wow. So I'm sending all that love to you and cannot wait to see what you have to say in the comments.